December 18th, 1944. 2:14 in the afternoon. Eastern Belgium, 300 meters southwest of Malmedy. The temperature hovered at -7 degrees Celsius, cold enough to freeze diesel fuel in its lines, cold enough to make metal contract and seize. Hauptmann Klaus Reinhardt stood beside 58 tons of silent steel, the Tiger Ausf. B tank behind him, pride of German engineering, equipped with an 88mm main gun capable of penetrating any Allied armor at 2,000 meters, sat motionless, not destroyed by enemy fire, not disabled by mechanical failure, simply out of fuel, completely, utterly, irrevocably empty. 300 meters ahead, through the snow-laden pine trees, Reinhardt could see the captured American supply depot. And in that moment, standing between his dead tank and that depot, Klaus Reinhardt experienced something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He walked toward the depot, boots crunching in fresh snow, and opened the first barrel. The sharp, clean smell of high-octane gasoline hit his nostrils. Full. He opened a second barrel. Full. A third. Full. He began counting the rows in this single secondary storage building. 247 barrels, each containing 200 liters. He did the mathematics automatically, the way a logistics officer's mind works even in moments of disbelief. 49,400 liters in one shed. Then he found the manifest, partially burned but legible. Forward Depot Baker 7, operational reserve 3 days. 3 days of American reserve equaled 2 months of fuel allocation for his entire division. What Hauptmann Reinhardt didn't know, couldn't know, standing there with his hands trembling from cold incomprehension, was that he'd just discovered the mathematical proof that Germany had already lost the war. Not through courage, not through tactics, not through will or ideology, but through simple, devastating arithmetic. 6 months earlier, in the summer briefings of 1944, the mood among German officers had been cautiously optimistic despite the Allied invasion of France. Oberst Heinrich Baumann, commander of logistics for the 5th Panzer Army, had addressed his staff in a converted Belgian farmhouse. "Gentlemen," he said, consulting reports spread across a weathered oak table, "our synthetic fuel production has reached 297,000 tons per month. The Führer has guaranteed that priority allocation for the coming winter offensive will provide sufficient fuel for a decisive strike." The officers had nodded. The numbers seemed adequate. For comparison, the entire Wehrmacht consumed approximately 400,000 tons monthly across all fronts. A winter offensive in the West would require, by their calculations, approximately 75,000 tons. Doable, tight, but doable. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was what they were actually facing. American petroleum production in 1944 exceeded 4.8 million tons per month. Not synthetic fuel extracted from coal through expensive, complex processes. Real petroleum, pumped from Texas and Oklahoma and California, refined in facilities that operated 24 hours daily, transported across an ocean by a merchant fleet so vast it defied comprehension. The ratio was approximately 16:1. For every liter Germany produced, America produced 16. But ratios are abstractions. Numbers on paper don't bleed. They don't freeze in Belgian forests. They don't explain the look in a tank commander's eyes when his engine dies 2 kilometers from the enemy line. Klaus Reinhardt had been a logistics officer for 3 years by December of 1944. He'd served in Russia, witnessed the disaster of Stalingrad from the relative safety of a supply depot 400 kilometers west, seen what happened when fuel trucks didn't arrive, when ammunition ran short, when the mathematics of war turned against you. He prided himself on realism, on clear-eyed assessment of resources versus requirements. On December 16th, when Operation Wacht am Rhein began, when thousands of German vehicles poured through the Ardennes forest in Hitler's last desperate gamble to split the Allied armies and capture Antwerp, Reinhardt had calculated his unit's fuel consumption with characteristic precision. The 1st SS Panzer Division had been allocated fuel for 150 kilometers of advance. The distance to Antwerp, 210 kilometers. The plan assumed capturing American fuel depots en route. "We'll refuel from their supplies," Major General Hermann Preece had announced confidently. Intelligence indicates substantial forward stockpiles. It was true. Intelligence did indicate that. What intelligence hadn't fully conveyed, couldn't fully convey through reports and reconnaissance photographs, was the scale. The incomprehensible, reality-defying scale. December 18th began badly for Kampfgruppe Reinhardt. Of the 42 tanks that started the offensive 2 days prior, only 27 remained operational. Not due to combat losses, they'd encountered relatively light resistance initially, but fuel consumption. The cold increased viscosity, reduced efficiency. Engines ran longer to maintain operating temperature. The mathematics of their fuel allocation had been calculated for autumn conditions, not this bitter, penetrating cold. By noon, Reinhardt's Tiger and 3 Panzerderfus had gone silent, their tanks reading empty. The rest of the column continued forward, unable to spare fuel for stragglers, racing against time and their own dwindling reserves. Reinhardt ordered his crew to wait with the vehicles while he and Feldwebel Otto Kraus walked ahead on foot. They'd received radio communication of a captured American depot nearby. Perhaps enough fuel remained to get their tanks moving. Perhaps. The walk through the forest took 22 minutes. When they emerged into the clearing and saw the depot, Reinhardt stopped. Just stopped, staring. It was too large. The buildings, the stacked materials, the organized rows of supplies. This was supposed to be a forward depot. Forward meant temporary, minimal, just enough. This looked like a major supply installation. They approached cautiously, weapons ready, but the depot was deserted. American forces had withdrawn hours earlier, and they'd left everything. Feldwebel Kraus entered the first building, what appeared to be a vehicle maintenance shed. He emerged 2 minutes later, his face expressing something Reinhardt couldn't immediately identify. Not quite shock, not quite comprehension. "Herr Hauptmann," Kraus said quietly, "you need to see this." The maintenance shed contained tools, diagnostic equipment, spare parts for American vehicles, alternators, water pumps, fuel injectors, organized in labeled bins. "Count the fuel injectors," Kraus said. Reinhardt counted. 67 new fuel injectors for GMC trucks, still in factory wrapping. His entire division's maintenance depot had received 14 injectors in the past 6 months. Total. For all vehicle types. "It's just one category," Kraus observed. "One shed. Check the carburetor section. 83 carburetors. Various models." Reinhardt picked one up. The manufacturing stamp read, "Produced March 1944, Detroit, Michigan." 8 months old. Fresh from factory. Stored here in a forward depot as routine spare inventory. He set it down carefully, as if it might break, and walked to the next building, the fuel storage facility. This is where he found the 247 barrels. Standing among those barrels, Reinhardt experienced a moment of cognitive dissonance so profound it felt physical. His rational mind, trained in logistics, in supply mathematics, in the calculus of war, insisted on processing what he saw, but the implications were too large, too devastating. He opened barrel after barrel, all full. He checked dates on the manifests. Delivered December 9th, 9 days ago. Operational reserve for 3rd Armored Division forward elements. Reserve, not primary supply, not critical emergency cache. Reserve. He found another manifest, partially water damaged but readable. Fuel allocation, forward operations, December 8 through December 21. Primary depot, Baker 1. Secondary depot, Baker 7. Tertiary depot, Baker 12. 3 depots. This was the secondary. Feldwebel Kraus appeared in the doorway. "Herr Hauptmann, you should see the ration storage." Reinhardt followed him to a third building. C-ration cases stacked floor to ceiling. He calculated quickly. Approximately 3,000 cases. Each case containing enough food for 12 men for 1 day. Enough to feed 36,000 men for 1 day. Or 3,600 men for 10 days. Forward reserve for 1 division. His division, 4,200 men, had been on reduced rations since October. 2,200 calories per man daily, and that included sawdust extended bread. He picked up a C-ration case. Packed November 1944. 3 weeks ago, he opened it, Ham, real ham, in sealed tins. Crackers, cheese, chocolate, cigarettes, coffee, instant coffee, real coffee, not roasted grain substitute. They fed their soldiers this, Krauss said quietly. Every day. This was standard. Reinhardt set the case down. His hands were shaking, not from cold anymore. They walked through the depot in silence, building after building. Medical supplies, ammunition, spare track links for Sherman tanks, radio equipment, tents, blankets, boots. Everything organized, labeled, inventoried. Everything. Herr Hauptmann, Krauss said, standing in the ammunition storage building. We captured 7 of these depots in the first 2 days of the offensive. 7. Reinhardt did the mathematics. If each was comparable in size, if each contained similar supplies. How much fuel total? Krauss asked, reading his thoughts. Approximately 346,000 liters, Reinhardt replied. If each depot matches this one. Enough to fuel our entire Panzer Army for the complete advance to Antwerp, with 20% reserve remaining. They stood in silence. The implication was inescapable. The Americans had left, scattered across the Ardennes in their hasty retreat. Enough fuel to power the entire German offensive. Just sitting in forward depots. Routine operational reserve. Not even primary supply. Reserve. But the discovery that broke something fundamental in Klaus Reinhardt's understanding came in the 4th building, the administrative office. Among scattered papers and abandoned equipment, he found an order, typed on official U.S. Army stationery. Depot Baker 7, Standing Order 47. If forced to evacuate and unable to transport excess fuel supplies, destroy all quantities exceeding 72-hour operational reserve to prevent enemy capture. The order was dated August 1944. 4 months old. Standard procedure. Routine. He read it again, slower, making sure he understood. Then he saw the implementation report stapled behind it. December 15th. Executed partial compliance with Standing Order 47. Destroyed 83,200 liters excess fuel prior to evacuation to prevent potential enemy utilization. 83,200 liters. Destroyed. Burned. Because it was excess. More than the 72-hour reserve they'd maintain even while retreating. That quantity would have fueled his entire division for the complete advance to the Meuse River. With fuel remaining, they'd burned it. As routine procedure. Because it was excess. Reinhardt sat down on a wooden chair, still holding the order. Feldwebel Krauss read over his shoulder. Neither man spoke for a long time. Finally, Krauss asked, "How is this possible?" Reinhardt's response came from somewhere deep, somewhere that had been calculating and measuring and trying to make inadequate resources stretch for 3 years of war. It's not just possible, Feldwebel. This is their normal. This is what they consider routine, adequate, standard procedure. He gestured at the papers scattered across the desk. Supply manifests, requisition forms, all showing the same pattern. Supplies delivered, supplies consumed, supplies replaced, no shortages, no allocations, no desperate calculations trying to make 3 weeks' supply last for 6. Just supply runs low, new supply arrives, automatic, reliable, infinite. We've been fighting a war of scarcity, Reinhardt continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Every liter of fuel measured, every round of ammunition counted, every ration carefully allocated. We've been at war for 5 years, and we've been rationing for 4 of them. They've been at war for 3 years, and they've never rationed once. Krauss picked up another manifest. December 13th, delivered to Baker 7, 252 barrels fuel. December 14th, consumed, 47 barrels. December 15th, delivered to Baker 7, 198 barrels fuel. Reinhardt saw what Krauss had noticed. They replaced the consumed fuel before they'd used even a quarter of existing supply. They maintain reserves on top of reserves, Krauss said. They never let it run low. The 2 men walked back to where their tanks sat silent in the cold. 3 kilometers distant, they could hear artillery fire. The offensive continued. Other units still possessing fuel, still pushing forward, still hoping. Reinhardt looked at his Tiger tank. 58 tons of sophisticated machinery. A single King Tiger cost approximately 300,000 Reichsmarks to produce. The 88mm gun alone required 50 hours of precision machining. Krupp steel armor, carefully designed and manufactured. Maybach engine, 700 horsepower. Sitting motionless because its fuel tank, which held 560 liters, was empty. 300 meters away sat 49,400 liters in one shed. The distance between those 2 points, 58-ton tank and fuel to run it, was 300 meters, walkable in 4 minutes. And it might as well have been 300 kilometers, because that fuel was American fuel, in American barrels, part of American supply chains that stretched back across an ocean to a nation producing petroleum at levels that defied rational comprehension. That fuel wasn't just gasoline, it was evidence, proof, mathematical demonstration of why this war ended only one way. Reinhardt wasn't the only German officer making similar discoveries that December. Across the Ardennes, as Kampfgruppen advanced and then stalled, as fuel ran out and vehicles stopped, Wehrmacht personnel encountered captured American installations and equipment. Each discovery told the same story, sometimes with even more devastating clarity. Oberleutnant Hans Müller, a maintenance officer with the 2nd Panzer Division, captured an American field workshop on December 19th. The workshop contained equipment for field repairs of vehicles, portable generators, welding equipment, hydraulic lifts, tool sets. Every Sherman tank crew, Muller wrote in his report, later discovered in archives, carried a toolkit containing 47 pieces. Every crew. Our Panzer IVs shared one toolkit per platoon. When the kit was lost or damaged, we improvised. He cataloged the welding equipment. The Americans brought portable oxyacetylene welding rigs to forward positions for field repairs. We were instructed to scavenge wire and attempt cold welding techniques to conserve resources. The mathematics of maintenance, another layer. The Americans didn't just have more tanks, they had infrastructure to keep those tanks running, spare parts, tools, trained mechanics, dedicated maintenance units. The Wehrmacht had mechanics, certainly, skilled, dedicated men, but they worked with improvised tools, scavenged parts, and desperate ingenuity born of chronic shortage. Hauptmann Friedrich Hoffmann, a signals officer, captured an American communications post on December 20th. He found 47 radio sets, various models, all functioning. Each American company-level unit, he reported, possessed minimum 3 radio sets, company command, platoon leaders, and forward observers. We allocated 1 radio per battalion, sometimes 1 per regiment. Their junior officers communicated by radio as standard procedure. Ours used runners. The implications cascaded. Real-time communication, coordinated movement, immediate response to changing conditions, versus delayed information, runners crossing dangerous ground, decisions made on outdated intelligence. It wasn't that German officers were less skilled or less brave. It was infrastructure, resources, the accumulated weight of industrial capacity. Lieutenant Otto Brandt, commanding a reconnaissance unit, encountered an abandoned American aid station on December 21st. Medical supplies in quantities he'd never seen, morphine, sulfa drugs, plasma, bandages, surgical instruments. They equipped forward aid stations, he wrote, better than our base hospitals. Every medic carried supplies we reserved for critical cases. They treated minor wounds with materials we couldn't spare even for severely injured men. Mathematics of suffering. American soldiers received immediate treatment. German soldiers hoped treatment existed when, if, they reached medical facilities kilometers behind the lines. But perhaps the most devastating discovery came from Oberst Wilhelm Steiner, a veteran staff officer assigned to evaluate captured American documentation. On December 23rd, in a rapidly established headquarters in a captured Belgian town, Steiner compiled reports from dozens of units, each describing similar findings. He created a summary document. The document was captured by American forces in January 1945 and preserved in military archives. It makes for difficult reading. Summary assessment: American material superiority. Based on captured installations, documents, and enemy equipment examination, the following represents conservative estimates of American resource availability relative to Wehrmacht equivalents. Fuel supplies. Forward American depots contain, on average, 14 to 22 days operational reserve. Wehrmacht forward depots contain 2 to 4 days reserve. Ratio, approximately 7 to 1. Ammunition expenditure. American artillery units fire, on average, 400 to 700 rounds per gun daily. Wehrmacht artillery fires 40 to 90 rounds daily. Ratio, approximately 8 to 1. Rations. American soldiers receive 2,800 to 3,200 calories daily, including meat, vegetables, chocolate, coffee. German soldiers receive 1,800 to 2,200 calories daily, including sawdust extended bread, substitute coffee. Quality differential, incalculable. Spare parts availability. American maintenance units stock parts for immediate replacement. 92% of mechanical failures repaired within 24 hours. Wehrmacht repair times average 5 to 14 days, often requiring parts fabrication or scavenging. Efficiency ratio, approximately 8 to 1. The document continued for 17 pages. Each category told the same story, but numbers on paper, even devastating numbers, remained abstractions until experienced directly. On December 24th, Klaus Reinhardt experienced the final crushing proof of American material superiority. His unit, still stalled near Malmedy, received radio communication. A fuel convoy was attempting to reach them. Precious fuel, scraped together from reserves, being pushed forward to restart the stalled offensive. The convoy was attacked by American fighter bombers 7 kilometers from their position. Reinhardt and his men heard the aircraft, P-47 Thunderbolts. The distinctive sound of their engines, the rattling roar of their 50 caliber machine guns, the explosions. When the attack ended, Reinhardt led a party to the convoy, or what remained. 12 fuel trucks, burning. The drivers had attempted to disperse, but the American pilots had hunted each vehicle methodically. Systematic, professional, complete. Approximately 18,000 liters of fuel, the scraped-together reserve of an entire Army Corps, burning black smoke into the winter sky. Reinhardt stood watching it burn. Otto Kraus stood beside him. "The fighters," Kraus said quietly. "They didn't leave until every truck was destroyed." Reinhardt nodded. He'd noticed that too. The American pilots hadn't simply attacked and departed. They'd circled, making multiple passes, ensuring complete destruction. Resource denial, thorough, professional. He thought about the order he'd found at Depot Baker 7. Americans burning 83,000 liters of their own fuel because it was excess. Americans hunting German fuel trucks to deny 18,000 liters. To the Americans, 83,000 liters was disposable excess. 18,000 liters was worth dedicated air assets and sustained attack. The contrast wasn't just material, it was philosophical. A nation with such abundance it burned surplus as routine procedure, fighting a nation that had been rationing for years. Mathematics doesn't lie. That night, December 24th, Christmas Eve, Klaus Reinhardt sat in a frozen Belgian farmhouse and wrote in his journal. He'd maintained the journal since 1941. A personal record, not official reports. Honest assessment. "We have lost," he wrote. "Not today, not this week. We lost years ago, when we chose to fight an enemy whose industrial capacity we didn't understand and couldn't match. I've spent today calculating ratios, fuel, ammunition, food, spare parts. Every ratio runs 8 to 1, 10 to 1, 16 to 1. And these are their forward supplies, their reserves, their excess. What must their homeland production be? We've been fighting with courage, skill, tactical innovation. They've been fighting with mathematics. Courage can't defeat arithmetic. A Tiger tank stops just as completely from empty fuel tank as from enemy shell. More completely. The shell at least would be dramatic. The empty tank is merely inevitable." He continued writing for 3 pages. Detailed calculations, resource comparisons, cold assessment from a logistics officer who'd spent 3 years trying to make insufficient resources sufficient. "The offensive will fail," he concluded. "Not from lack of will, not from tactical errors, from fuel. We'll advance until our tanks stop. Then American tanks with full tanks will counterattack. This was always how it would end. Reinhardt's prediction proved accurate with depressing precision. The German offensive achieved initial success through surprise and concentrated force. But by December 26th, fuel shortages had become critical across the entire assault. Tanks stopped. Vehicles were abandoned. Infantry units, lacking transport, couldn't keep pace with armored spearheads. Meanwhile, American forces, after initial disruption, consolidated and counterattacked. With full fuel tanks, with ammunition reserves, with air support once weather cleared, with everything. The contrast became almost darkly comic. German infantry marching on foot past abandoned Panther tanks. American infantry riding trucks advancing rapidly, bypassing German positions. German artillery carefully rationing shells. American artillery firing preparation barrages that consumed more ammunition in 1 hour than German batteries received in 1 month. By early January 1945, the offensive had collapsed completely. German forces retreated, leaving behind approximately 600 armored vehicles, many abandoned due to fuel shortage, intact, functional, empty. American forces recovered them, towed them to depots, examined them. Intelligence officers wrote reports marveling at German engineering sophistication. The Panther tank represents arguably the finest medium tank design of the war, one analysis noted. Superior armor design, excellent gun, good mobility when operational. Overcomplicated final drive causes maintenance issues, but overall, a remarkable achievement in engineering. The report concluded. However, engineering excellence proves insufficient when industrial capacity cannot provide adequate numbers, spare parts, or most critically, fuel. Captured Panthers sit immobile for lack of fuel while M4 Shermans, mechanically simpler but adequately supplied, remain operational. War is not won by best equipment. War is won by adequate equipment in sufficient quantity with reliable supply. Years later, historians analyzing the Battle of the Bulge would debate tactical decisions, strategic choices, what-if scenarios. What if weather had remained poor longer, grounding American air power? What if German fuel convoys had reached forward units? What if? But men who'd been there, men who'd seen the depots and done the mathematics, knew. General Lieutenant Hasso von Manteuffel, who commanded 5th Panzer Army during the offensive, stated in post-war interrogation, "We achieved surprise. We achieved initial breakthrough. Our soldiers fought with remarkable courage despite 3 years of war. But fuel shortage stopped our advance more effectively than American resistance. We advanced approximately 60 kilometers. Stopped. Not defeated. Stopped. Empty." When asked about captured American supplies, von Manteuffel gave a response that was preserved in interrogation transcripts. "We captured multiple American depots. The supplies we found represented more material wealth than most German units saw in months of allocation, and this was what they left behind while retreating, not their primary supplies. What they abandoned as excess or couldn't transport quickly. It was instructive." "Instructive how?" the interrogator asked. Von Manteuffel paused, choosing words carefully. "It instructed us that we were fighting an opponent who considered normal what we considered impossible abundance." The numbers, compiled after the war, told the story with brutal clarity. German fuel allocation for Operation Wacht am Rhein, approximately 4.5 million liters. Sufficient for 150 kilometers advance under optimal conditions. Actual fuel consumed before offensive stalled, approximately 3.2 million liters. Distance advanced, 60 to 90 kilometers depending on sector. American fuel reserves in the Ardennes region, late December 1944, approximately 97 million liters. Total, including primary depots, forward reserves, and operational stockpiles. The ratio was approximately 22 to 1. For every liter available to German forces, American forces had 22. But even these numbers understate reality. Because American supplies were resupplied continuously, German supplies were finite pool. American convoys brought fuel daily from ports at Antwerp and Cherbourg. German supply lines stretched back to synthetic fuel plants operating under Allied bombing. The mathematics wasn't just unfavorable, It was impossible. American ammunition expenditure during the Battle of the Bulge, December 16 through January 25, approximately 896,000 artillery shells. German expenditure same period, approximately 123,000 shells. American replacement vehicles delivered during battle, approximately 2,400. German replacement vehicles, approximately 370. American aerial sorties flown once weather cleared, approximately 17,200. German sorties, approximately 2,100. Every category, every metric, same ratio, 8-1, 10-1, 16-1. Hauptmann Klaus Reinhardt survived the Battle of the Bulge, survived the war. He was captured by American forces on February 4, 1945, during the retreat back into Germany. He spent 8 months in a prisoner of war camp in France, then Belgium. The camp was adequately supplied. Prisoners received 2,100 calories daily, more than he'd eaten as a German officer in the field. In June 1945, a month after German surrender, American military intelligence officers interviewed him. Standard procedure, assessment of German logistics, capabilities, lessons learned. The interview transcript was preserved. "When did you know Germany would lose the war?" the American captain asked. Reinhardt thought for a moment. "Stalingrad, I suppose. Many of us understood then. But when did you know absolutely?" "December 18, 1944, Reinhardt replied. "Near Malmedy, when I found your fuel depot." He described the discovery, the barrels, the manifests, the order to burn excess fuel. The American captain listened without interrupting. When Reinhardt finished, the captain said, "The depot you found was classified as a secondary forward reserve, minimal stockpile." "I know," Reinhardt said. "That's why I knew we'd lost." He explained his calculations, the ratios, the comparison between American excess and German scarcity. The captain nodded slowly. "Most German officers we interview mention material superiority, tanks, planes, numbers. You're the first who's focused specifically on logistics." "Because logistics is truth," Reinhardt replied. "Tanks without fuel are monuments. Planes without fuel are sculptures. Soldiers without food are refugees. War is mathematics. You had the arithmetic. We had courage. Courage can't add." The interview concluded. But one exchange near the end proved haunting. The American captain asked, almost casually, "The fuel we burned, the 83,000 liters at that depot, did you understand why?" "Denial of resources to enemy," Reinhardt said. "Standard procedure." "Yes," the captain agreed. "But also something else. Psychological warfare. We wanted you to find those orders. Wanted you to know we burned more fuel than you had. Wanted you to do the mathematics." Reinhardt stared at him. "Psychological warfare. Your soldiers were brave, well-trained, experienced. We couldn't match that with training. We matched it with resources so vast they became demoralizing. It's easier to fight courageously when you believe victory is possible. It's very difficult when you've seen proof it's not, when you've calculated the ratios yourself, when you know mathematically that you've already lost." Reinhardt sat in silence for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "It worked." The captain closed his notebook. "I know." Years later, when the transcript was declassified, that exchange generated discussion among military historians. The deliberate use of material abundance as psychological weapon, not just having resources, but displaying them, wasting them, making the waste visible to enemy forces, making them calculate ratios, understand odds, abandon hope. War fought not just with bombs, but with mathematics deliberately displayed. Klaus Reinhardt returned to Germany in early 1946. Germany in ruins, cities destroyed, industry shattered, population traumatized. He found work as a clerk, later as an accountant. Numbers. He'd always been good with numbers. He married in 1948, had 2 children, lived a quiet life in a rebuilt nation. But he never forgot December 18, 1944. In 1973, 29 years later, A German historian researching the Battle of the Bulge contacted him, asked for interview. Reinhardt agreed. The historian asked about tactics, decisions, command structure, standard questions. Then asked, what moment from the battle remains most vivid? Reinhardt didn't hesitate. The fuel depot, near Malmedy, December 18, 1944. He described it again. Details still sharp after 3 decades. The barrels, the manifests, the order to burn excess. I stood there, he told the historian, doing calculations. The mathematics kept getting worse, more devastating. Each number made the next worse. And then I walked back to my Tiger tank, sitting silent 300 meters away, the most powerful tank in the world at that time. 58 tons, 88mm gun, advanced optics, sophisticated engineering, immobile, not from battle damage, from empty fuel tank, and 300 meters away, 49,000 liters of fuel. The distance between my tank and that fuel was 300 meters. The distance between German capability and American capacity was infinite. The historian used that quote as the epigraph for his book. But Reinhardt added something else, not included in the published work. Something the historian's notes recorded but deemed too editorial for historical text. People ask how Germany lost the war. They expect answers about military failures, strategic mistakes, Hitler's decisions. Those all mattered. But the real answer is simpler. We lost because we were fighting an opponent who could burn 83,000 liters of fuel as routine waste while we were rationing every liter. We lost because their excess exceeded our total. We lost because they fought the war with mathematics we couldn't match. They didn't defeat us with better tactics or braver soldiers. They defeated us with arithmetic, and arithmetic is inescapable. In 1988, 44 years after the battle, a memorial was dedicated near Malmedy. Belgian and American officials, German veterans invited. A ceremony marking sites of the offensive. Klaus Reinhardt attended, now 73 years old. He walked slowly to where Depot Baker 7 had stood. The buildings were long gone, cleared in 1945. Just fields now. But he remembered exactly where the fuel storage building had been. A Belgian teenager, grandson of a resistance fighter serving as guide for the memorial event, approached him. "Were you here, sir?" the boy asked in careful German. "During the battle?" "Yes," Reinhardt replied. "I was here." "What happened here?" "I learned something," Reinhardt said. "What?" "That war is mathematics, and we'd brought the wrong numbers." The boy didn't understand. Reinhardt didn't elaborate, but he stood there for 10 minutes looking at empty fields, calculating ratios one more time. 49,400 liters in one shed, times 7 captured depots, approximately 346,000 liters captured, versus 83,000 liters burned as excess, versus 18,000 liters in the convoy that never arrived. The mathematics still didn't balance, still showed the same impossible disparities. He died in 1996, age 81. His obituary mentioned his service, his post-war career, his family. Standard biographical summary. But in his papers, discovered by his daughter while sorting his effects, she found his wartime journal, including the December 24th entry. She donated the journal to a military museum. It resides there now, preserved, available to researchers. December 24, 1944, Christmas Eve, written in careful hand. "We have lost, not today, not this week. We lost years ago." The museum displays it in a climate-controlled case. Next to it, for context, they placed a rusted fuel barrel, American, 200-liter capacity, recovered from the Ardennes region, marked with faded stenciling. U.S. Army, Depot Baker 7. The barrel is empty now, has been empty for 80 years. But its presence next to Reinhardt's journal creates an exhibit more powerful than explanatory text. Tank without fuel, barrel that once contained fuel, journal explaining why one couldn't use the other, mathematics of impossible war. Today, historians studying the Battle of the Bulge focus on multiple factors. German strategic miscalculation, American resilience, weather conditions, supply lines, all legitimate analytical approaches. But for men who were there, who saw the depots and did the mathematics themselves, the answer was simpler. They were asked to fight a war of scarcity against an opponent fighting a war of abundance. Asked to conserve every resource against an opponent who burned excess. Asked to improvise and adapt against an opponent who simply resupplied. It wasn't lack of courage. Wasn't tactical incompetence. Wasn't even strategic failure. It was mathematics. Cold, inescapable, devastating mathematics. A Tiger tank sits in a museum in Belgium, carefully preserved, restored to display condition. Visitors marvel at its engineering, its size, its gun, its armor. The museum placard explains specifications. Weight, 58 tons. Engine, Maybach, 700 horsepower. Gun, 88mm KWK-43. Armor, 150mm frontal. The placard doesn't mention that dozens of these engineering marvels stopped advancing in December 1944 because their fuel tanks read empty. That they sat immobile, intact, functional, defeated by arithmetic rather than ammunition. Next to the Tiger, the museum displays a small exhibit. A fuel barrel, American, empty, and a quote from Hauptmann Klaus Reinhardt. The distance between my tank and that fuel was 300 meters. The distance between German capability and American capacity was infinite. Visitors read the quote. Some understand immediately. Others require a moment. But eventually, comprehension arrives. The Tiger didn't fail mechanically. German soldiers didn't fail in courage. Germany failed mathematically. They brought insufficient numbers to a mathematical war. And when war becomes mathematics, the side with arithmetic wins. Not always quickly, not always cleanly, but inevitably, always inevitably.